The Conquer Worry Show, episode number 19. Welcome to the Conquer Worry Show, the show dedicated to helping people who struggle with their minds. If you are looking for stories of resilience, if you are looking for inspiration, or you simply want to conquer worry, this is the show for you.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conquer Worry Show. I am your host, Jay Coulter, and I am excited to introduce our guest today, Gabe Howard. Gabe is a motivational speaker, an award-winning advocate, and a mental illness blogger. Gabe lives with severe bipolar and anxiety disorders. In the past 10 years, he has made it his mission to put a face on mental illness that isn't stereotypical. Society often sees people living with mental illness at their worst, and he works to add a more balanced view to the conversation. If you would like to check out his site while you're listening, it can be found at gabehoward.com. Gabe, are you ready to help some folks conquer worry?
I am.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Hey, so we start our shows with a couple of anchor questions. First, we would like to get to know a little bit about you, and specifically, we're looking for things that we couldn't find in a simple Google search. So take a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself.
If you can't find it on Google, I'm not sure that it exists, but I'll do my best. When I was 12 years old, I played the Mad Hatter in a recreation center play, and since then I've had the Mad Hatter tattooed on my arm. When I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a lot of folks were saying, hey, maybe that's foreshadowing. But as far as deep, dark secrets that people on the internet don't know, my love for the Mad Hatter is definitely pretty out there. I don't talk about it too much because, I don't want Disney to come after me.
And I can see why that wouldn't be on Google either. So, we like to bookend our episodes with our anchor questions, and we'll talk about your purpose later in the episode, but let's focus on worry right now. In 1 to 2 sentences, how do you personally conquer worry?
I don't know that you can say that you conquer worry. I live with worry, and more often than not, I beat it. And I do it by doing the little things: sleep hygiene, taking my medicine, paying attention, listening to the people around me. All of these things help me keep it under control. So
focusing on the little things.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That would be less than 2 sentences, definitely. I should have said it your way.
Now, Gabe, everybody has struggled with worry at some point in their life. Maybe it was something like a particularly stressful time in your life, or like you and I, finding out that you're struggling with a mental illness. Take us to a low point in your struggle and tell us what was going on and then how you mentally managed your way through it.
The lowest point was when I was admitted to the psychiatric hospital, over 10 years ago now. And mentally what was going on was not a lot. I was very, very depressed. I was very, very anxious. I was delusional. I had paranoia. And I was suicidal. And in my brain at the time, suicide seemed like a viable option. And in all of my struggles with mental illness, I really have never been lower than the day that I felt that I would be better off if I no longer existed.
How old were you, Gabe?
Through it, I was 25 years old. 25 years old.
Okay. So you're there in the hospital, and you're having these deep suicidal thoughts at 25 years old.
Correct. It was where I was diagnosed for the first time. I was diagnosed initially with bipolar disorder. The anxiety disorder would be officially diagnosed about a year later. And it just really set off, this 4-year struggle. And that's really the best way that I could put it, a struggle of the disease trying to take over, the illness trying to win out, and me trying to beat it. And it's epic. It's an epic battle. It's not something that can be beat in a weekend. It's not a trip to the doctor. It's not a lotion. It's not a pill. It's not a therapy session. It's not a pick yourself up from your bootstraps. It's this mixture of all of those things and, internal will and just the hope to go on that allows you to really reach, recovery or remission or to lead a good life. I mean, whatever, buzzword we want to tack on, moving past the symptoms and into the things that we want to be alive for. I'm not alive to fight an anxiety disorder. I'm alive to, play the drums, go to hockey, watch football, love my wife. That's what I live for. I had to fight mental illness. It was just what I had to do for a while, and it was incredibly time consuming. It was a time consuming thing to do. But doing it made all the difference.
I like that term, epic battle. Before you got into that 4-year epic battle, take us back to the diagnosis. You realized you were sick. Did you comprehend how sick you were and what you needed to do to get better?
That's the key in my life. That's where my life took, if it's an epic battle, that's the point where it took an epic left turn. I didn't know I was sick. I had no idea. A woman that I was casually dating saw the mental illness, the suicidal thoughts, saw all the issues in me, and she said, look, I'm taking you to the emergency room. And I looked dead at her, and I said, no, sick people go to the emergency room. I'm not sick. I don't need to go. And I think people have heard this story before, and they're like, well, of course, that you were out of your mind. You were, obviously very severely mentally ill, and that's why you thought that. I need to be clear. No, that's not why I thought that. I thought that because I didn't think anything that I was going through was a symptom of anything. I thought it was my personality, and I thought that I needed to get over it. It's just, I can't make that any more clear. I'm not going to go to the hospital and report that I'm a hockey fan, because I don't think being a hockey fan is proof of anything. The feelings that were in me, I didn't think was diagnostic. I didn't think there was anything wrong. So I really resisted going to the hospital, but she won out in the end, and she got me there, and obviously it made all the difference. I needed to be diagnosed. I needed help. I was just completely unaware of it.
That's the male persona, though, to fight it, to say, no, I don't need help. I can handle this. I need to pick myself up on my bootstraps, and I sure as heck don't need to go to a hospital. Is that fair?
I think that it is fair, but to even take it a step further, I think it's that, mental illness was, straitjackets, violence, acting crazy, rocking back and forth. Even today, with all of the knowledge I have now, if I go back to those moments, the years that I had all the symptoms of anxiety, bipolar, paranoia, etc., they still don't look like what I thought mental illness was. So I don't think you could have convinced me that I was mentally ill, because my working knowledge of mental illness was, just media portrayals. I mean, nobody taught me anything. Nobody taught my family anything. So again, I use a mole analogy a lot. I have moles all over my body. The only reason that I know that none of them are dangerous is because a doctor with education told me they were safe. Otherwise, I could be walking around with a cancerous mole right now that my education level and my skill set would not allow me to know was dangerous. But it would be dangerous. I just wouldn't know it.
So, Gabe, sticking with the time period when you're 25, before the 4-year epic battle, tell us about the support network you had around you.
My support network was fine. I didn't know that I needed a support network, to be honest. I mean, I was married at the time. I've been married twice before, and I am on my third marriage, and that's a whole other story that we don't have time for. So she was supportive. I mean, we had a tumultuous marriage. I was an untreated bipolar. We were both very, very young. This creates problems. But, my family, the presentation I gave, I show a picture of my family, and man, we looked like the 80s in the picture. We were in Myrtle Beach, but we were all there. There's 20 people in the picture, and, we were normal, as normal as families can be. It wasn't that there wasn't people around me. I wasn't a loner. I wasn't isolated. I wasn't at odds with my family. There wasn't any of that. It's just, nobody recognized that anything was wrong. Again, everything got passed off somewhere else. He's moody. That's just the way that he is. Well, you need to calm down. You need to stop it. Well, when Gabe's up, he's up. And when he's down, he's down. It's really easy to push this stuff aside if you just have no knowledge of it. And that's really where my family was. But my support was fine. I had a typical family.
Excellent. So you're getting ready. You start your 4-year, and I keep going back to that term epic battle because I love it. You're starting the epic battle. You've accepted that you're sick. Tell us what you did to get better and what the hardest adjustment was to make in the beginning.
The hardest adjustment in the beginning is when I started, I honestly thought that it was one trip to the doctor, one trip to the therapist. The day that I accepted that I was sick and I started to go to therapy, I really thought that it was all going to be over relatively quickly. I mean, I knew that, meds took a while to adjust. I mean, I wasn't completely unprepared, but if you would have told me that day that it was going to take 4 years, I probably would have called you a liar.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure.
I thought that it would be quicker. And I also kept saying things like, before I was sick. Well, I want to get back to before I was sick. I want to get back to before I was sick. Well, before I was sick, I had X. And it took a long time to mourn the loss of the life that I thought I had. The truth is before I was sick, and, I'm making air quotes that everybody cannot see, in the podcast, but before I was sick, I was suicidal. I was a train wreck. I would stay up all night. I would take unnecessary risks. I had, hypersexuality, drug abuse. I mean, just everything that comes along with severe mental illness, I embodied in some form. Life was not fantastic, but strangely, it was coveted over the diagnosis, and it got whitewashed because it was before I was sick, and now I'm sick. In reality, and what I say now is, it was before I was diagnosed. I was always sick. I was just unaware.
And Gabe, tell our listeners how old you are today.
I'm sorry?
Tell our listeners how old you are today.
I am 37 years old. I will be 38 in November, if anybody wants to send a gift.
So you're 13 years removed from really getting diagnosed, going through the 4-year struggle of getting better. You're on the other side, and today you're an advocate for people who struggle with mental health issues. Tell us, what drove your decision to become an advocate?
I think I might have control issues because I decided that I was the best person to do it. I do say that somewhat funny, but there's not a lot of people stepping up. I mean, there are a lot of people. There's wonderful people. We can find them all over. But in the grand scheme, I mean, there's 400 million people in America. There's not that many of us when it really gets right down to it. And it's difficult to decide that, you want to be the person that changes the perception of mental illness for an entire society. It's somewhat grandiose. And having bipolar disorder and saying, hey, I want to change the way that America looks at mental illness, it almost sounds like a symptom of bipolar disorder, but it's not. I believe that everybody's life, everybody's story has the ability to help somebody else. And we share them in many, many ways, whether it be at church, whether it be in our communities, whether it be with our families, or whether it be like me, in writing, on the internet, in presentations and on stages. My life can resonate with somebody, and other people's lives have certainly resonated with me. My life just happens to have, mental illness in it. And I have a wealth of information that other people need. And people aren't raising their hands and asking for it, and we're not giving it to them, and it's hard to find these people. So the more Gabe Howards in the world, the better off we're all going to be, because then this information will be there. I've never broken my leg, but I know an awful lot about broken legs. I know that you need a cast. I know that it takes 6 weeks for the bone to mend. I know that people sign the cast, and it's fun. I know that you use crutches. This is a lot of information to have about an illness I've never had. I had mental illness. I had bipolar disorder. I knew exactly zero. And, that really it was devastating, and it could have killed me, and it cost me a lot. It cost me a lot in my life. And if I can be a cautionary tale, if I can be a source of inspiration, or if I can just be an educational model for another person, that's what I'm here for. And that's why I decided to do it.
It's great, Gabe. And that's why we wanted you on this show. And listen, don't worry about grandiose ideas. At the end of the day, the bigger the better. You're doing great work in the space. And I tell you, in doing some pre-work on the show, I learned that you and I have a passion for our hatred for the term committed suicide. And I really enjoyed reading your thoughts on it. Tell our listeners exactly why you don't like the term committed suicide.
Committed suicide makes it sound like you had a hand in it, that it was a choice. You know, you commit a robbery, you die by suicide. Suicide is just the English term for, died from mental illness. And it sort of strips away the dignity from the death from mental illness. And it also adds just an element of control that people that are truly dying from their mental illness and because of their mental illness that people just don't have. When I was suicidal, there was an element of weighing the pros and cons, but the sicker that I got, the more that thought process was disrupted by the illness. And the more it sounded like a good choice, and the more I wanted to do it, and the more the illness took over, the more likely that outcome became. And if I would have done it, if I would have died by suicide, I wouldn't have been around to tell anybody what was happening because I'd be gone. I'd just be dead. I'm not faking. I'm not crying for help. I'm not manipulating. I'm not trying to get attention. I'm just dead. But my family is told that I did it to hurt them. In some cases, I can't be buried in certain cemeteries or go to certain church services for my funeral. Society starts to whisper, well, I don't know why he did it. I don't know why he did it. I don't know why he did it. And what actually happened is a disease beat me. But I can't even rest in peace because this happened. And I see so many people who've had a loved one die by suicide. And their common thread is, why did they do this to us? And I look at all of them and say they didn't. Their disease did it to them. And that's the hardest part of all of this, that there isn't even dignity in death. And if I could change that one thing, I think that we'd be better off as a society, because, blaming somebody that dies from an illness is there just isn't a level that it doesn't impact, from the person that died to their family, to the people around them, to how serious we take the illness. I mean, after all, if the illness can't kill you, if it's the person's fault, we don't have to pay attention to it, because after all, that person did it to themselves. So we don't have to treat the illness because that person did it to themselves. There's nothing to do here. That's not true. We need to treat the illness. The illness did it to them. Let's focus on that. It's the illness's fault. It's a completely different view, and it's a lot different than how mainstream society sees suicide.
Gabe, that's well put. Let's change gears and talk a little bit about medications. As someone who is a mental health advocate, and obviously you've had your struggles with mental illness, what are your thoughts on medications and their place in the treatment process?
I think they absolutely have a place. I think that there are certain mental illnesses that by and large cannot be controlled without medication. We could do a whole show on medication. As sure as I'm sitting here, somebody would call up and say, well, do you think over-medicating people is bad? Absolutely. Do you think that some people get medications that don't need it, and which is just over-medication in a different form? Absolutely. Do you think that the concept of, I have a mental illness, I want a magic pill, and I don't want to go to therapy, take any responsibility or work, magic pill cure is good? No, that's bad. It has a place, and it needs to have a correct place. For me, and me personally, I can't live without the medicine. Without it, I cannot control my bipolar disorder and my anxiety. And that becomes my choice. I need that tool in my toolbox. But I got to tell you, there's just so much surrounding medication that people don't realize. And, family members ask me all the time, why won't my loved one take medication? And, I always answer two ways. One, I don't know your loved one, so I'm just going to kind of speak off the top of my head here. But, medication is a daily reminder. And for me, it's a twice daily reminder that I have an illness that people are judging me for, that a lot of people in our society thinks makes me less than them. And every day, not only am I reminded of it, I have to put a pill in my mouth and swallow it. That's one heck of a reminder. And then in some cases, we have entire industries telling us to do it, the medical industries, our families, and in some cases, across the United States, we have, the government even trying to get involved in medication. It's just like, wow, the medication alone sort of exists over here, and that's already problematic. But now we've got all of this around it. So there are no easy answers here. But I got to tell you, if you're a person with severe mental illness, the medication is more likely than not going to make your life better. And it's going to take a long time to get adjusted. There's lots of medications. A lot of people are on a cocktail. I myself take 5. So, it's some educated trial and error with your doctor. And it could take a couple of years to get that right. And I think that one of the major reasons that medicine gets a bad rap is the expectation. Some folks expect that first prescription to be the one that does it. That is not a realistic expectation. It's just not. It's not the first prescription. It's probably not even the 5th prescription that's going to do it. This is something that's going to have to be adjusted, for me over 2-3 years to really get the meds adjusted. So I needed to really strap in for the long haul. And if I would have thought that the first visit was going to do it, I too would have been sorely disappointed.
Gabe, you're a wealth of information based upon your experience and obviously the research that you've done. How can our listeners find out a little bit more about what you offer?
Hey, my website. This is 2014. I am alive on the internet. If you go to GabeHoward.com, that's GabeHoward. Everything you need is there, including my email address, Facebook, Twitter. I mean, you got to have an online presence if you want to survive these days. So if it's not there, it might not exist.
Okay. That's the truth. So before we wrap up here, we like to book in the end of our episodes with a couple of questions about purpose. And I'm convinced that if you can find your purpose, it lays the foundation for conquering worry. And experience has also taught me that about only 5% of the folks out there can articulate what their purpose in life is. You've had the benefit of knowing I was going to ask you this question, Gabe, but we sure would like to know what your life's purpose is.
My life's purpose is to help as many people as possible. It's one of those answers that almost sounds like a fake answer, but believe me, I love people. I am an extrovert through and through. I get all of my energy, all of my education, all of my compassion, all of my wisdom. Everything comes from people. You take me away from people for too long, and I will become unhappy. My goal is just to meet, or my purpose is to meet as many of these people as possible and have meaningful conversations with all of them. And I want to be clear, and I have thought about this, you can tell. I want to be clear. I don't need everybody to agree with me to have a meaningful conversation. I think this gets lost more often than not. There's people all over the place that disagree with me. I consider them friends, and we have meaningful conversations about so many wonderful things that we agree to disagree on. But I got to tell you, there's real value in that connection, and I think people lose out a lot.
So to follow up to that question, Gabe, do you have any thoughts how somebody could go and find their life's purpose if they don't have one?
Man, that's a heck of a follow-up question, I got to tell you. I think that everybody's different. I think you have to keep looking. I think that a purpose is something that is definitely within every single person, and you're probably not going to find it the first day. My life's purpose at 12 was to watch the Smurfs. At 37, it's significantly different. And I'll be honest with you, had I never been diagnosed with mental illness, there wouldn't be any mental illness advocacy in any part of my purpose. Life is long. I think you